Oh, we're live. Hi, my name is Paul Geraghty. I'm the chair of the Gallery of Photography Ireland, and I am going to be hosting this Photo Basel conversation about photo prizes. And the question we hope to answer today with Stella Nantongo and John Fleetwood is who's the main beneficiary of photo prizes, photo awards, photo competitions. So this is kind of funny. So I suppose my background and the reason why I'm chairing this talk is since about 2011, I've been helping organize some of the world's biggest and most successful photography awards and prizes. And some of them have been quite specialized, from the Bird Photographer of the Year to the California Academy's Big Picture Nature Awards to the Syngenta Photo Award. And one of the awards that I help run is the CAP Prize. So what I want to do is I want to introduce Stella Nantongo, and who is one of the principals behind the Uganda Press Photo, and I'd like her to just introduce herself and to hopefully not be too uncomfortable doing that. So I'd like to open the floor to you, Stella. You're muted.
I'm Stella Nantongo. I am the program coordinator for the Uganda Press Photo Award, which has actually been running. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. So it's basically an exhibition that's a competition / exhibition that's open to Ugandans and has kind of snowballed into more than just Ugandans. We have created another branch that is open to East Africans as well as emerging photographers. And I guess I'll leave the rest for later on in the chat. Thanks.
Okay, so I'd like to introduce John Fleetwood now, and he's the director of photo. So John, could you talk about your, well, it's not a prize, right? So I'll let you talk about that, right?
Well, good afternoon, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak. It's great to also be speaking with Stella. So I'm based in Johannesburg, and Photo is the organization that we work with. So Photo is really a platform for photography, and one of the activities that we organize are some awards. Some of the awards are locally, so for instance, the Ernest Cole Award that we will launch later this year. But in the past, we have run also the Democracy Award, which is an award for Southern African photographers. And so a lot of the practice of photo as a platform has got to do with the development of photography and photographers. So looking kind of at critical languages and visual culture as a way to think about photography in the region.
Thank you, John. So I know that, like, when with the CAP Prize, what we attempt to do with the CAP Prize is to create a platform for raising awareness of African photography and certainly helping African photographers reach a wider audience. So we really see the main beneficiaries of our award as the photographer. How do you guys see it? And I'm going to show that to Stella, yeah, first.
Yeah, definitely. The photographers are the beneficiaries, the top beneficiaries, because they not only get a platform to showcase their work, to also show their work to broader audiences, and also just to even network and see what else is out there and kind of put themselves as a benchmark against their peers. I think that is one of the things that usually they look out for and they aspire to when they submit to all these competitions. But some of the other beneficiaries, at least in our situation, is also just the community, because it's been growing slowly by slowly just by having this backing of the competitions that they look forward to every year. So yeah.
Okay, John, would you like to jump in?
Yeah, I think of great importance for me is this idea of how we build community, and that even though we award these awards to individuals, they form part of a larger community, and it's really how you benchmark this community to understand what is really important, what is relevant, what are the kind of necessary photographs to be looked at in society. So awards don't only mark great photographers, they mark their work. They talk about the content that judges have decided are important and need to be elevated and be seen in a wider sense. And through that, I think that there's an incredibly important political message and social message about what photography is looking at, but also the kind of languages that photography is developing in that process.
Okay, so platform is a really important point, and community are the two important points that I took away from both your comments. When I think about platform for whether it be an exhibition, an award, a prize, I always think about 5 things, right? I think about money. So is there some sort of remuneration for the winner? I think about the exhibition or the showcase of the work. I think about the production of the final work that will go into the show. And I also think about how you communicate for the photographer and raise awareness of those things. Now, I hope that's 4. That might be 5, right? But in your platform, how do you see it? So picking up those points, like for example, I'll take the first one. Money, is that, do you think that's important, an important component of an award, and why or why not? And I'm going to ask that to John first, because Stella's been first.
Well, I suppose, there's no way that money cannot be important. Money is critical, and one needs to absolutely understand the kind of larger industry of photography, in particular on the continent, that there are very few institutions to ask money from. So funding is not readily available. And so awards become one of the vehicles through which one can run a project and earn income that hopefully can sustain not just kind of the future of your career, but like the future of your human body and bread and butter. And so these things are absolutely critical. But, I think often we work within funds and funding scenarios where, unfortunately, the prize money that the photographers might receive is not necessarily the most attractive part. And that we need to look at a kind of a larger thinking around an award. And in particular for us, there's this question around how can it be a platform for development of this photographer? How can it be a way to challenge, build support structures, make sure that there's a network around this photographer so that when they move, that they have got a future support. And I think those are some of the aspects that are, I think, become necessary supports because of the lack of a really large enough fund to support photographers as a prize money.
Okay. Stella, do you have anything you'd like to throw in? Oh, we've lost you again.
I agree entirely that, can you hear me now?
Yeah, you're great.
I agree that money and the prize usually come out on top for most photographers, especially in our environment. For the Uganda Press Photo Award, while we don't offer money per se, but we still counter it in what we do offer, which is usually gear. We find that most of the time, gear is very expensive. So if we can counter that a little bit for the photographers and just, entice them, but to participate. But ultimately, like John said, I think overall the best, the most important component to me, looking into competitions is just, besides the money part, is building the community, showcasing your work, right? And just benchmarking yourself and pushing yourself outside the boundaries that you used to, because I think sometimes we are so comfortable in our spaces, wherever we are, and just participating in different competitions can kind of push you to do better, to work better, to aspire to greater. So I think if people start thinking about it that way, maybe they can gain more than just the financial bit of it.
So I think it's a really important point, because I think that oftentimes when people receive an award, they receive this reputation of the award, and so all eyes are on you, and it creates a certain expectation that hopefully is a positive one. Expectation that you're going to have to produce something good now because you've got this reputation, and so an award is a interesting thing in that perhaps the money you use up within the first 24 hours, few months, but that the reputation is something that you can make work for yourself.
Mm-hmm. So just to pick up on two points. This is a point about your reputation and network building. So to a photographer, it really matters when people who matter think their work is great, and to build your network and to build the network of individuals who can actually help your career. Sometimes a photography competition is the only place where you can actually get your work in front of curators, magazine editors, commissioning editors, and I think that's a really, really important facet. If I'm a photographer and I'm looking to enter an award, I immediately look at the review panel. What other factors do you think would determine you as a photographer perhaps entering or engaging with a prize or an award? We've spoken about money. We've spoken about the reputation of the people behind the award. What else is there?
Sorry, may I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, I like the fact that you've already talked about the reviewers and who actually gets to see the work. Is something, at least when we are organizing the Uganda Press Photo Award and the East African Photographer Award, and we are thinking about who is judging, and we try to get all the people that are kind of relevant stakeholders to our market, people that we think if they see work, they can actually look into maybe talking to someone in the future, right? So these are the things that we always think about when we're thinking of a judging panel. And beyond just the competition, we try to also tie into the competition after the winners have been announced, and we have a portfolio review where all the participants actually get dibs, the winners get dibs to see, and also just present beyond what they actually submitted. Just present more of their work to these people who will then hopefully lift them beyond what is available right now. Yeah.
And so photographers often live with the illusion that awards are about them. But personally, I think the most interesting space for the awards is really the panel of judges, because that's often where the most interesting discussions are happening about what is relevant, what are we looking at, what are the kind of important aspects that comes forth through the award. So for me, and particularly with Democracy, that's always been such an incredibly productive time where you are sharing time with really informed people who are able to look at it and give feedback. And so for us, that is such an important moment to record and also forward those opinions and positions. I always wish that somehow the photographers can sit with the reviewers so that they can have this direct moment. But of course, that's not always possible. So I think, within that, all awards, and again, I perhaps speak for the region, I've got the photographers on the one hand, but it's also building a community of curators, of panelists, of judges that interact, that get to know each other, that are able to share opinions around what's happening. And I think so that's another layer of how awards are so critical in building community and benchmarking. So it's really this review panel, the judges that are going to sit together and think about what is benchmarking, what are these kind of stories that are really critical to look at. So absolutely.
Okay, so that's really, really interesting, because I've actually sat in those rooms with those many times when those bun fights and those fights are going on, and really people get very passionate about the photographers that they're arguing for and they're trying to push forward. And I've done both. I've done both those kind of awards, and I've done the ones where everything is reviewed remotely, and then the scores or the critiques are aggregated to actually find the winner. But do you think your awards seeks out it brings the best work to the fore? Do you think anything is left on the floor when you curate your award and you're looking for the winners, or do you think they're kind of fairly unfair, if you know what I mean? Because all these things these are competitions. Competitions by their very essence there's a certain unfairness to them. Depends on the bias of the judges. But how do you overcome that? And how can you talk to the photographers afterwards and say, well, I'm going to ask John what you think about that.
Well, I suppose one needs to, at the core, answer the idea of what is an award, and how can we create hierarchies of saying what is better and what is best? And the only way really to do it is through having a panel of judges where there are different opinions, and it's about this process of having different opinions that is really the productive moment where one can say that somebody's work was acknowledged. And I think so many times, and we all know that, and I hope, of course, photographers would also know that it is an accumulation. It's how these things come together at a particular moment. It's the judges, it's the day, it's how it's presented, it's what work people see in the beginning and what work people see later on. So there's so many possibilities that kind of influence the way that eventually we find the best work. And the best work is never the best work. It's the work that fits the brief the best. And I think that is such a big difference between what is good and what is not. So I think oftentimes it's so important to give feedback to photographers that might be not the winners, but might be the photographers that produced important work, and to be noted that their work was seen and acknowledged and understood, but that their work did not fit this particular brief the best. I think it's quite important that photographers understand and not get disheartened by the fact that they are not the winners. It just means that in some cases that your work was not the best fit for this group of judges on this day. But of course, at the same time, this acknowledgement does go a far way, and I think we are always deeply concerned about who is getting an award and who is not, because it's such an important moment in how we think about photography and how we create visibilities, and of course, more importantly, invisibilities. So awards have been so long ways of erasing important work. It has been so long focusing on certain spaces and not at others, that I think in today's context, we really need to think very carefully about what awards do.
Okay. Stella, do you want to talk about that, about, you know, the fairness and the unfairness of awards, and how you feel about that? Or do you, it's unfair for me to ask you this, is your award fair or unfair? But
here's the thing, I, at least in my perspective, we try to be as fair as possible. You know, again, like John said, just having the different voices and having, I'm going to use the Uganda Press Photo Award as an example, having a voice that will show, share perspective or share context to, you know, to the other people who might not be very aware of what's going on. And we try to balance this by just having just different various voices that just coming into the conversation. So yes, probably sometimes some stuff will stay on the, you know, on the floor, to use your terminology. And there's really not much you can do about that because it's the nature of the beast. But again, what we try to do to counter that is have the portfolio review just after the winners have been announced. Have the judges, people who actually sat in the panel and talked and discussed about who was winning, be present, or those who can be present to actually give feedback to any photographers who are willing to actually come and receive it. That way you kind of, it opens up mind, also gives them structure or direction on how and what they can do better. Sometimes it's just technical things. Sometimes it's just, like John said, different day, different, something else is going on. People are feeling that it's very subjective, unfortunately. And there's nothing that we can do about that. So just basically try in different spaces and see what lands, so to speak. Yeah.
So one of the things we used to do in some of the awards that I was involved with is we had very long shortlists. So like, let's say 1,000 people would enter an award or prize. We would shortlist maybe 200 photographers. So at least they get some sort of feedback to know that where they were in the mean. Not always easy for organizers to do, but it was something that we thought would benefit. Just to move on to curation. So one of the things that we like with regard to an award is it gives a photographer an opportunity to curate their own work. So they'll be working, you know, often in isolation or within a small group of people, and it gives them a point in time to say, okay, I have a body of work. Let's experiment with that. So I like, would you agree that awards are somewhere where you should experiment, because it doesn't really matter what the judges say at the end of the day. If you win, great, or if you shortlist, great. But if you don't, it's still a point of feedback, and it's an opportunity for you to curate your work. So what advice would you give to a photographer about curating their work for an award?
Honestly, I always tell people, photographers who are always very anxious about what they submit to, that you have nothing to lose. You know, just experiment. I'm all for experimentation. Just go for it. See what works. Because sometimes different platforms expect different things. So if you read the concept for the different competition or award and see that you can actually, you know, suit with, if you curate your work in a certain way, I say go for it. It doesn't hurt, and it just basically inspires you and gears you towards something probably different that you'd never thought of. So, yeah.
Great. John, do you want to throw something into that?
Yeah, I think that we see the proliferation of awards all across the world, and we are now at a stage where I think one has to really prepare very carefully in how you present your work, and I think that just that process of preparation helps you often so much, it creates an opportunity for photographers to think about their work and think how others would like to see their work, what they might think about their work. And I think that's a great opportunity to think through. So, and this is again where one needs to kind of position your work towards what the award is pointing to. And I think those debates are actually really important. And I think a lot of the time as an organization, we sit with photographers to assist and help them to think about, how others would view their work and how it works to be kind of more relevant. What I find kind of interesting in this idea of curating their work, and I think this is a concern, is that oftentimes photographers feel that they hand their work over to judges and that judges are going to judge their work, instead of seeing it exactly as you've stated it, as an opportunity to curate their work in a way to look at the judges, to look at the people that are involved, look at the award, and think how they can position their work in line with that, as a way also to make their chances better.
So the advice is do your homework, look at the judging panel, right? See what type of work they might be interested in, and think about the originality of your work and developing your voice and the story you want to tell. I think
yes, of course, and I think never forgetting that you can also change people's minds. You might think that a particular panelist might not be interested in a certain kind of photographs, but you have to absolutely trust your work if you think that you can change their mind. And what better way there is than handing in a fantastic body of work that you thought nobody would love, and then you can convince them because the work's good.
So where do you think competitions are going? Like, what do you see the future of awards and competitions? And I'm going to ask Stella, because you were the one who looked most frightened by that question. Actually, I'll ask John first, and I'll come back to you.
Thank you.
Well, we're all frightened by many things. Here we are sitting virtually discussing an award, and more we can see that opportunities during COVID are going to stay restricted, and that we need to think about how photographs are distributed virtually and on the internet. So, look, I think we all understand that in one way, awards can open up thinking, can create new talent, can make us aware of what benchmarking is, but it can also stifle ideas. And I think sometimes one needs to be very careful that you don't see your career as an awards photographer, but rather that you see your career as having a real voice, as having something that you want to tell the world. And maybe awards is something that can help you to fast track that. Maybe awards could be something that can give you criticism to such a degree that you can improve on it. And so I think we need to be cautious about what awards do and what they don't do, what they show and what they hide. And I think, particularly on the continent, we need to understand what that means. I think we have got an incredible, rich history of photography on the continent, yet those images have not been awarded. We've only seen a few photographers from the continent being internationally awarded. And so there's this discrepancy between the world and how African photography is seen on one hand, and on the other hand, what awards have to do in terms of the structures that are on the continent. I think we need to understand the limitations of what awards can do on the continent, but we also need to understand how incredibly important they are.
Stella, what do you think? Oh, you're muted. We've lost you, Stella. We can't hear you.
You're always losing me. No, the future of the awards. Again, exactly what John has said, but I feel like, at least now with the conversation that's happening, there's a lot more, I think there still is a lot more thought going into what kind of works are being presented. And also, I think there's also a shift into like not just the normal big awards that we're used to. I think smaller opportunities are arising all over the continent. And I think once we start reaching out, not just looking at the big ones, World Press Photo or Lens, or all these big awards that are out there, and just look at the smaller awards that are coming up, the smaller photo fests that are coming up on the continent and the opportunities that they can provide for photographers on the continent. I think that's because right now there's a lot of eyes on Africa and what Africa has to offer. If we can take these little spaces and make them our own and use them to show what doesn't make it, because a lot of our work is never going to make it in some of those big awards, right? Last year we had some luck. This year, was there anything really? So as I think once we start thinking smaller, start thinking closer to, home, just build stuff, grassroots stuff, just, build our own little spaces. I think that will go a long way into shifting what else makes it out there. Yeah, and we can fit it all into the bigger picture. Sorry. John,
I'm also wondering what the possibilities for photography are going to be in the next decade. So I'm thinking about awards and how awards are presented, and how the idea of a two-dimensional image is something that we look at on the screen, but how the photograph as part of installation, or how the photograph in other kinds of scenarios can also be looked at. And so I think this continuing developing mode of photography is really something that I think is going to be interesting for us to think about. So I'm just thinking about what projections, for instance, would do. And that in one case, one can say that this is a great body of work. But once you start to think about the ephemeral photograph, the projected photograph, the photograph that is not so easy to look at or to enjoy on a two-dimensional scale, will there be new awards that look at that, or will our awards just look wider and wider to understand where photography begins and where it ends? So I think
I just picking up on that point. It's just the last 14 months have been incredibly challenging for anyone who's a curator, who has an exhibition space that invites people in to view work. They haven't been able to do that. And the entire cultural sector throughout the world is looking at new ways of engaging with people. And photography certainly has a place to play. And I suppose for younger people, they never see a photograph on a wall. Their photographs live on phones, on computer screens, right? They never will ever see a photograph on a wall. And that's an interesting departure for photography, where making prints and making these artifacts that go into our exhibitions, into our books, into our wherever, may not be as important to the next generation coming along. And I think whatever we do with the awards, that it'll have to recognize that. So Stella, would you agree that for a new generation coming behind us, the meaning of photography as an artifact is changing? Oh, Stella, you're muted.
Yes and no. Yes, in the grand scheme of things, it has changed. People are looking on their phones. How many exhibitions have we seen right now that are virtual, including Photo Basel itself? But on the ground here in Uganda, for example, I think there's still quite a ways to go to get to that point where we think more, like bigger, because right now people can barely, I mean, we haven't yet gotten to the space where we can actually showcase as much as we would like to all the communities that you would think can benefit from it. And with the limitations here, technological limitations, I don't think it's going to happen. But on the grand scale, in the bigger picture, yes, definitely. It's changing, and COVID has kind of forced us to move in that direction a bit faster. And for some people, they're going to be able to think more in, like three-dimensional spaces. But on the ground, it's still quite a ways to go, unfortunately. Okay. Yeah.
John, would you like to?
I think the question of awards might also be up for consideration. I think we have got so many people using photographs that to really direct an award to speak about important or critical work, I think is more and more difficult as we move along, because there's so many competitors. There are so many photography awards that are all equally speaking about what is happening in the world. So yeah, I think all of the things that have been said, plus the fact that awards need to think very, very carefully about these worlds that we are creating for ourselves, and how difficult it will be in the future.
So I'm going to ask you one last question. If you were going to give some advice to someone entering your award, what would you give them? And I'll go with John first, and I'll come back to you, Stella.
Well, I think make sure that you've got fantastic work, that you are absolutely convinced about your own work, that you know that you have gone all the way to create the best out of your work. Be clear about your theme, your content, your message. Speak to other people about that, and then very carefully prepare for your submission. Think about what image people will see first, what they will see last, and how that kind of creates reading for people that are looking at perhaps 100, 200 submissions. Think about that mass of images that people have to look through. And don't make mistakes where you struggle with the basic technical stuff. That's not where the fight is. The fight is about meaning. Make sure your pictures are fantastic and meaningful.
Yeah. The one thing that I would say is you have to be sure of the why. I think once you understand why do you want to submit to this particular competition? What do you stand to gain? And I'm not talking about the financial or the prize money. I'm talking about just are you pushing yourself beyond what you used to? What is your image going to say? Why are you putting these images forward? What do they speak about whatever it is that you're trying to speak about or to portray? I think if you have that, if you understand that very keenly, even if you don't get the award, I think just adding to what also John said, just knowing and understanding your images, able to speak for them and understanding why you are submitting to this particular competition, even if it doesn't pan out the way you want it to, I think you are more steadfast, easily swayed or disheartened if at all you don't get in it. So yeah.
Okay, so the only thing I would add to that is I would regard a competition or an award or a prize puts an externality on your work. It gives you a deadline and it gives you a brief, and that can give you a valuable context within to review and curate your own work. And sometimes we do need that externality, a hard deadline and something to focus on. and an expectation of an audience. The review panel becomes our understanding of an audience, and I think that's a helpful stretch mechanic that any artist could profit from and in their work. Please. We lost you. Can't.
How about now?
Yeah. Yes, you're back.
Just to add to what you've just said, and I usually have conversations with photographers who win our awards, because we always have this opportunity to network at the end at the exhibition grounds. And one of the things that I've noticed is usually this, when I'm talking to especially emerging photographers, they're always talking about how they try to experiment and try different ways of doing things, just with the idea of trying out for a certain category. And I think that is also has value of its own, just, tweaking up your art or your craft a little bit differently, just, with that little idea in your mind of where you want to go. I think it just adds a little bit of, creativity to a photographer's mind and a photographer's portfolio as you go along.
Great.
Yeah.
So we're coming up to our time, guys. You've been brilliant. You've made it very easy on me, which is very important. And I've certainly enjoyed talking to both of you, and I've learned quite a bit. So I suppose I'd just like to say thank you to both of you, Stella and John, and good luck with your awards.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
John, it's been a pleasure chatting with you.
Fantastic. Yes, the same here. And it's, thank you very much for Photo Basel for this opportunity. I think it's so important that these conversations happen in audiences across the world. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd like to thank Photo Basel as well. And I hope this thing is going to stop now.